Good morning. Uh, what Dr. Merchant said was factually correct, but I need to put it all in perspective. For me, whatever I've done was with an attitude of learning. Let me give you a little background about what I've been doing. I'm basically an engineer. I've done my engineering in mechanical engineering, and I was destined to go into the corporate world, which I did. I stepped into what was at that time called Telco. Today it's called Tata Motors in Jamshedpur. And there were certain events that happened there. There was a lockout in nearby Tisco, the steel manufacturing unit, and then the company also declared a lockout, and there were clashes, and there was bloodshed. Now, I was a young trainee. I was with the design department of Telco, and I began to wonder with myself that what is it that in spite of all the advances that we have managed to make, technologically, scientifically, socially, economically, we've managed to come a long way. But what is it that we've not been able to settle our differences in a more mature way? Why does it have to result into violence and so on and so forth? This set me thinking, and I thought about this for a long, long time, all of 6 months. And somehow I realized that the answer to this question is in the field of education. It's just that a proper educational system, a proper educational approach is the answer to the future generations where they can correct a lot that is wrong in our society. I quit my job, came to Patna, you've heard of the place, Bihar, went there, set up a school. Now this was an experimental school. We thought that there were a few like-minded people at that time. We wanted to question a lot of things that were thought to be practice and to be correct. We said we will question each one of them and find out for ourselves what is the right way. Long story short, we ran this school, discovered a lot of things, understanding full well with all humility that none of us were educationists. I was an engineer. I knew nothing about education. So we had to learn the hard way. Discovered a lot of things, and then we packaged whatever we learned, and then I got into teachers training. At some point of time, we also realized that education is fine, but you also need to get into man management, or if you like, human resource management. Because finally a teacher in a school, in a classroom, is also a sort of a manager. This teacher has to manage 60 children. So communication comes in, motivation comes in, crisis management comes in, a whole lot of things that a manager is supposed to do. That's how I got more involved in corporate trainings, and again, it was a learning process for me. Did that for a number of years in India and internationally. And now what I am doing as a principal of this school is bringing everything together. The educational aspect of what we have learned and the administrative and managerial part of what we have learned, and see how it works in real life. So Mr. Merchant has been very kind to give credit to a lot of things that he just said, but actually it's a learning process. So I'm greatly thankful for circumstances who have allowed me to do all of this. Coming to today's topic, it's a very unique one. I wonder how many of you have ever heard of this thing, this whole concept of leadership without title. It's a new concept, not really a new concept. This particular title is new, relatively new, but the concept has been around for a long time. And we'll talk about that. But frankly, let's first talk about leadership. What do we understand by leadership? Now, there's been a kind of a discourse going on, whether leaders are born or leaders are made or so on and so forth, and what is the difference between a leader and a manager, and can a leader be a manager, can a manager be a leader, all sorts of things. But really what we need to do is keep things simple. It was mentioned yesterday, if you were there, in one of the presentations, the last thing that the gentleman said was keep it simple, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, we have complicated everything for ourselves. Look at HR. Look at one of the simplest HR manuals. The layman will not be able to understand what is written there because of the technical terms that have been used, because of a lot of processes and a lot of jargon and a lot of other things that they have brought in. Somehow we feel we are very smart doing that. Well, it's not at all smart making simple things very complex. For example, leadership. Do you know they have categorized leadership into something like 50 types? 50 types, and then there are several subtypes of leaders in terms of leadership styles and so on and so forth. In reality, what we have done is we have fragmented our knowledge. And fragmentation of knowledge is not a very healthy thing, it's a very dangerous thing. You should be able to have a sight. You should be able to see the total of reality as it exists. So let's focus on leadership for a while. What do we mean by leader? Who is a leader? And what I'm going to propose today is that there needs to be a paradigm shift in our understanding of leadership. Ask yourself, who do you think is a leader? Now let's not talk about political leadership here. Let's talk about corporate leadership, because that's our cup of tea. Who according to you, is a corporate leader? Create a mental image for yourself of a corporate leader. Now we'll be discussing about that. And what are the significance of that? What are the advantages of having such people around for the organization, for the workforce, and so on and so forth. And from there, we want to bring down this image that we have in our minds into a more manageable level. Right now, our leadership concepts are unmanageable, which is why we have very few leaders to draw upon. And that's not a healthy thing for the corporate world in India. How many people can claim to become Ratan Tatas? And that's the best type of leadership that you can ever imagine. But how many people are there around? Now, don't all companies deserve to become Tatas? They do. But where are you going to get Ratan Tatas in order for all companies to become the likes of Tata company? So there's something wrong somewhere. We need to simplify our understanding in order to have a wider pool of such leaders to draw upon to help our companies. Again, I don't want you to dwell upon Tatas and Birlas and Reliance and so on. Let's come down to our level, to our own textile companies, or what you are doing yourself. Let's keep things at that level for now. Now, just to set the tone moving about leadership, these are general comments that we glean. I may not necessarily believe in all of this, but this is what generally are being talked about. Leadership is a process by which a person influences. I strongly believe that leadership is all about influence. It's nothing more than this, nothing less than this. If you are able to influence somebody to do something which this person would otherwise not have done, you are a leader. Now, if you are able to influence a person to do something wrong, you're still a leader, but you are influencing a wrong kind of a leader. But this is the concept of leadership. It's all about influence. And we keep it simple at that. Leadership is all about influence. How greatly are you able to influence people depends on how great a leader you are. Now, this influence boils down into accomplishing objectives, adapting to change, creating cohesive and coherent teams, and bringing out excellence in the people that we are influencing. I request you to take note of this last point, because this is where I think existing leadership exhausts itself. Leadership is so much busy and engaged in doing so many other wonderful things that they forget that finally it's all about bringing the best in our people. So there's very little, and unfortunately this last point has been handed over to managers, not to leaders, and it's a wrong concept, it's a wrong approach. A manager manages what he has, but a leader is supposed to create better workforce, to bring out the best in them. But it's all about influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now again, these are, you look at any website, you'll see a lot of different permutations and combinations of what a leader is and what a manager is. I'm not going to dwell on this, take your pick from it, but just to note that there is difference. A manager is something else, a leader is entirely something else. So please don't confuse the two. A leader may be also placed due to circumstances in managerial positions, but it does not mean that both are the same. So I'll just dwell here for a while till you pick up what you like from here. Look at the second point. It's a very interesting thing. Leaders are supposed to focus on people, improve them, develop them, bring out the best. Managers focus on systems and processes. The people are taken for granted. They are there. As long as HR has given me this set of workers, now I have to manage them and get the work done. And I have to get it done properly and on time. Managers are all the time struggling with timelines and things like that. So their focus cannot be on development of their people. Now, that's where leadership comes in. Again, there are many different versions of this. What does a leader really do? But this is the simplest that we can consider. It is all about planning. You need to have strategic planning. You have to have a vision. Now, planning starts with a vision. You need to have a vision of where you are at today. The smallest of companies to the greatest one cannot afford to neglect this. As a leader, I need to know where I am today and what's happening around me and where do I want to go 5 years from now. 3 years strategic planning, 5 years strategic planning, and so on and so forth. It's indispensable today, even for the survival of the smallest companies. You cannot survive today without planning. It's no longer a gut feeling that I think it should be done this way and, we'll make it and so on. We've done it in the past. It doesn't work anymore because of the changed circumstances. And I'll come to you what those circumstances are. Then, of course, is delegation. The leader doesn't do it himself. The leader is supposed to delegate, get other people excited about his vision. I'm not talking about selling ideas. Now, there's a difference. That's what managers are supposed to do. Managers are supposed to sell ideas of the leadership. You like it, you don't like it, you've got to do it. Now, the best manager is the best seller of ideas. A manager who can sell ideas of the leadership is a good manager and is going places. But you've got to have your team in place, you delegate and you work out the strategies and they run with it. Then you can't leave it at that. There's always follow-up. Now, follow-up really means evaluation, assessment. You come back. In one of the talks yesterday, if you were there, it was mentioned that you have weekly meetings. You call your people and say, all right, every Saturday we are going to meet. This is the agenda. Come prepared. Follow up. Let me give you a word of caution here for all of you who think this is a good idea. We Indians are very bad at evaluation. We are very poor at doing it. Americans are great at doing it. Why? Because they do it objectively. They do not bring their subjective opinions into evaluation. We don't. We get critical. Immediately, as soon as we sit to evaluate, we had a wonderful conference. Let's evaluate and see how it went. We sit down and suddenly we get at the level of interpersons. Oh, you goofed up on what you did and so on and so forth. And the whole program, the whole process of evaluation is messed up. And there are a whole lot of interpersonal issues and bitterness, and the objective is not. We are following up, assuming that there are going to be goof-ups, there are going to be mistakes, but then we want to correct them. And if we have interpersonal issues, we are never going to get to do that. So it's very important to know how to do that. We have to rise above our egos, and we'll come to that again. And this whole concept of the redefined concept of leadership, that ego no longer has any place in what we do. It's not anymore about me. It's about us. So follow-up is a very important part of what we do. And of course, recognition. Recognition is something we all yearn for. Right from the day we were small kids. Look at in my school, I know that. There are really small children who yearn for recognition. To that unsung hero in a corner of your factory, on your shop floor, who's done something he thinks was great. His peers think he did great, but went unrecognized. And it's very demotivating. And then this cycle runs and runs and runs and gets better and better and better. So this is really what leadership is all about. Now, it does not mean there is one leader doing this. You could have an executive board. You could have a board of directors, and they are doing this. But basically, this is the cycle that it follows. Again, here's just a sample of what I was mentioning of how complicated we have made things. Now, this is just a few, and there are so many more. I don't necessarily agree with this. These are all aspects of the same process. I may be visionary, I may be affiliative also, but to different degrees. But it's wrong to say that we don't have all of these things in a particular leader. The question is, how do you develop all of these things? Because these are good things to have. So a visionary acts as an agent of change, and affiliative seeks cooperation and harmony and brings together processes and people. Democratic leader doesn't take his own call. He involves people, discusses things and so on. Coaching is a great thing. This is the best kind of leaders, if you ask me, people who hold hands of others and help them to work. And this will be the center of my discussion with you today. And of course, pace setting, somebody who sets high standards, leads by example. And of course, the autocratic leader we are very familiar with. They're all around us, but not very effective. Then there's the leadership types, leadership by position and title. I'm the leader, you don't listen to me, then you quit, you lose your job. And it's that simple. Leader by charisma and personality. This basically is a conventional image of a leader that we have. The leader, great personality, great orator, great charisma, great personality, all of that. That's a convention that we have. And people are awestruck by that whole image of the leader, and they know that they are expected to follow. Leader by moral example, leader by power exercise, intellectual leader, and leader because of ability to accomplish things. Again, I ask you to dwell on this last point, because this is something we'll be coming back again and again. Finally, a leader has to be able to do something, has to perform, regardless of what background he has and what he's all about. I'm introducing to you, I said we are going to simplify things. I believe there are only two types of leaders. The capital L leader and a small L leader. This is it. Let's simplify things and throw out of the window all these other wonderful concepts and theories about leadership. Let's make things very simple. Let's look at what the capital L leader is all about. This leader is a conventional leader, the stereotype. So you have a conventional stereotype: charisma, commanding, powerful personality, heroic, leads from the front, takes high risks, excellent orator, is a center of attention, is highly visible. Life cannot go on without that leader. This is the capital L leader that we have. And they're there. You can see them because they're visible all the time. You cannot, in fact, imagine a successful company without a capital L leader. Now, but there's a problem here. We have a problem. And now, after all these years of HR and all that we have been doing, we are now facing these problems. The problem is, one strong leader results in everybody else becoming followers. And I'll tell you why that's a problem. This strong leader is often too far away from the action. I mean, sitting in the boardroom up there and taking a bird's eye view of the whole company. And remember, we are talking about growing companies. If you have a small company, and if you're happy with that, then of course, that's fine. One person is good enough to manage things. But here's a recipe for growth. You know, we've been talking about sustainability. If you are in tune with the principles of sustainability, your mindset, your whole approach will have to be about growth. I have to somehow double everything, all the parameters of my company in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years, strategic planning. Then that one strong leader is not sufficient. You will not be able to handle life within that company. It's not going to be sustainable. You're too far away from the action. What's happening in the shop floor? You will never be able to know, even though you may be asked to do it, putting in extra hours, whatever. And there's so much to do. Again, with the concept of sustainability, if you have a vision for growth, there's so much to do. How can that one capital L leader accomplish so much? And there's a lot at stake. What if I go wrong? What if this capital L leader goes wrong? One wrong decision, and the world comes crumbling down. And I'll point out to that momentarily. It boils down to this concept of the pyramid view of leadership. The problem here is at the top of the pyramid of human resources. Your workforce, the people that you have working for you. At the top, you have great figures, very clear. They have the vision, they have strong values, high risk, they know what is right, they know what is wrong, they are very bold, they lead by example, and they have set out to change the world. These are the charismatic, powerful, stereotyped leaders on the top. Nothing wrong there. In fact, if you have them, you're very lucky. There's nothing wrong there. But the problem is, what about the rest? Our leadership principles and theories say nothing about the rest of the people. Actually, they are silent, assuming that the leader will take care of everything else. Now, this works to our disadvantage. I'll come to that. You see, this is the problem with the pyramid view of leadership. Most of the people that you have on your shop floor, your supervisors, your foremen, whatever you call them, these are the people who are not set out to change the world. They don't even see themselves as leaders in leadership roles and positions. They have been given a task to do. They've been given a job. Hopefully you have described the job description in writing. You have given it to them. And they're doing that as best as they can. Nothing more, nothing less. This is what I'm being paid for. This is what I'm doing. But the problem here is that the pyramid approach, by saying little about everyday work of ordinary workers, seems not to expect much from them. In effect, by positioning that capital L leader in your organization, what you're saying, without saying it, is that the rest of you follow him. Do your job and follow him. This worked till now. Up to this point, this is where we have come with this concept. This current paradigm of leadership has brought us till here. The question we have to ask is, now, is it enough? Where we are at, is it enough now? Or do we want to go further? The principles of sustainability indicate that definitely we have to go further. We are just 3% of export of apparel and textile in the whole world. And there's a lot of ground to be covered. So, is it enough from today onwards to expect the people to do just what they are expected to do? What their appointment letter and their roles and duties description says? You are to come at this time and you've got to supervise these number of people, make sure the machines are working okay. At the end of the day, clean up the shop floor area and go home. Is it okay to just expect, will you be satisfied if an employee does just that as much as you have asked him to do and nothing more? My suggestion is no. You should no longer be satisfied with that because your company is going nowhere. It's not going anywhere beyond where you are today. And that's the problem with this concept of leadership that we have. Not to say that you don't need these leaders. We'll come to that later. But you have to start thinking about leadership roles for the rest of the workforce. And that's the whole concept of leadership without title. Now, these are difficult times. And you know better than I do. These are difficult times. Economically, we are facing another potential recession. We've just come out of one. Another one is staring at us again. Not so much of our making, but more of Europe and US and all the mess that's happening in the West. And we suffer because of their shortcomings and because of their wrong policies and so on. Now, this is what is happening today. As of today, these are relevant for us to understand because you need to re-strategize. And you cannot say, all right, this will blow over. The recession will come, our sales will dip, we will not make so much money. So, okay, then it'll become all right and we'll make up for it. Maybe not. Maybe there is a way of not allowing sales to dip and actually readjust and do things differently. But let's recognize the challenges that exist today. Dramatically turbulent times. Look at what is happening to the share market today. It's amazing. I've never seen such fluctuations. Inter-day and intra-day fluctuations. Rupee value is going nowhere. Gold and silver are going up and down like crazy. It's never been like this. Even in the worst of times, it's never been like this. Now, we should worry. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future because of I just have one word for it. It's greed. What is happening in the West is a result of years and years of policies based on greed. It started with the recession of 2008, with the banking system and real estate and all of that, and it continues there. But we are affected by it. Competition is something you know. There was a lot of talk about Bangladesh catching up and overtaking us. So competition is something that you can no longer take for granted. And in fact, it's a theme of this conference, making competition irrelevant. So you need to worry about that. Also think about that. Realizing growth potentials, sustainability, if you believe in it, if you are beginning to align your thought processes with principles of sustainability, then you need to think in terms of growth. Not for yourself alone, but for the country. If you are growing, the country is growing along with you. So I think we all have that responsibility to factor in growth in all that we are doing. Human resource considerations, will come to it in the latter part of this presentation. Talent management and talent recruitment and retention and bringing the best out of them and all of that. And of course, employee engagement. This word engagement is a very tricky thing. I can just give you there was Mr. Bhatt yesterday said something that I found very interesting, that in The textile sector, I think he's mentioned something that we are short of workforce to the tune of 60 to 70%. Why? Because other sectors are booming and there is a constant outflow we are losing people here. Why? Because we are not able to retain. Meaning what? We are not able to engage our people in the work that they are supposed to do. Now, engagement means what? It means that I have my heart and soul inside of what I'm doing. It's not just the body there for 8 hours and doing what it is, but mind and soul. Now, how do you do that? I have not seen any one training manual or leadership theories that talks about this emotional aspect of employee engagement. And believe me, these are leadership issues. These are not things to do in the accounts department or some astute financial wizard will give you answers to it. It's plain simple. It's all about the leadership. To have the vision and know how to navigate these turbulent times. Now let me give you some disturbing figures. On the internet, Wikipedia, this has come from there. You check it for yourself. These are numbers of failed businesses internationally. These are failed businesses, companies that have shut down since 1980. In the 80s, in the decade of the 1980s, there were 46 companies international. Now, these are big companies. These are not small .com companies that shut down. We are not even talking. Wikipedia had a benchmark of several $1 billion. So these are big companies. 46 of them shut down. In the 90s, 86 shut down. In 5 years, 2000 to 2005, the previous two figures are 10-year periods. In only 5 years, 119 companies shut down, and I'll give you an example, a sampling of what some of these companies were. In 2006, 18 companies, 2007, 27 companies, 2008, 85 companies, 2009, 76 companies shut down. These were some of the companies that shut down. Now, Pan American World Airways, Pan Am, 1991. Number one airline of the US. Shut down. We are not discussing why. We'll come to that. Enron, we are familiar with it because this was homegrown and they had a mess in Maharashtra and all of that. But it was one of the great, it was a $90 billion company in 2001. Shut down. Polaroid Corporation, you're familiar with this instant photograph. And they would click and the photo would pop out immediately. Shut down in the year 2001. Also, Agfa Photo in 2005. Why? Because they were not able to adapt their technology to deal with this digital cameras and so on and so forth. Whereas Kodak was able to do that. Kodak also was like Agfa, producing film rolls and processing film, but they survived today and they're doing very well for themselves. They could not. Trans World Airlines, TWA, this was the number 2 airline company of the US, shut down. Swiss Air in 2002, shut down. Washington Mutual, 6th largest bank. Now these were hit by the recession storm. 6th largest bank in the US, 2008. Harrods, I put it here intentionally for you to know. Actually, in all these numbers that I mentioned, there are a whole lot of fashion companies and apparel companies and textile companies and so on. A lot of them. But I've just put one for you also to start thinking and internalizing this concern. You cannot cocoon yourself from these turbulent times, from all that is happening around us. Harrods shut down in 2008, and Lehman Brothers also, you're familiar, was a very messy thing. And AIG, it did not shut down. The government had to bail it out because it was a matter of prestige. American international group, how could America allow it to go defunct? They pumped in $186 billion to keep it afloat. This is the latest count. And AIG has since been selling off a lot of its assets in order to pay back all those. They are being termed as loans by the government, but $186 billion, how is AIG going to recover all of that and make profit on top of that? But this is where we are. Now closer home. Now, for those of you who remember, there was something called Yazdi motorcycles. If you remember, there used to be 3 brands of motorcycles, our days, when I was a young boy. I used to have one, I loved this bike. Bullet, Rajdoot, and Yazdi. There were these 3 motorbikes. Ideal Java closed down because it could not compete with the onset of the Japanese models of Suzuki and Honda when they came in, Hero, Honda and Suzuki. They were not able to redefine themselves. And they went out. Why? Because they did not have four-stroke technology, and the Japanese had. The Java company Java is a Czechoslovakian company, and they had access to two-stroke engine, so they closed down. Hindustan Motors ambassador, the manufacturers of ambassador, they have not closed down, but they are surviving only by government support. Government keeps buying their cars, and they are just doing that. Why? Because they've not been able to redefine themselves. They have one product, and they're happy with that, and they don't know how to go on from here without diluting the brand that they already have. So this is, and also Royal Enfield, Bullet. Except for the army, nobody else is buying except those who have nostalgia and sense of, nostalgic about this motorbike. These are Royal Enfields, again, is in the market only at the behest of the army, because they are the only ones buying these bikes in bulk. Satyam Computers, you already know what happened to them. Nagarjuna Finance shut down. A lot of money down the drain, and now they are trying to repay all of that. Motorola handset had 50% of the market in India. Today is just 12%. What happened? With 50% market share, huge, they lost it. And Subiksha multi-brand retail chain with 1,600 outlets, small, big, all over, shut down, could not sustain it. And of course, Air India, if you look at the least said about it, the better, and a whole lot of public sector undertaking. It's all in a mess, and they're just pumping in money in order to keep them alive. Now, the question is why? Now, there'll be many examples, and there'll be many explanations for this recession and bad luck and financial turmoil and whatever. But frankly, these are all excuses. If you're saying bad luck, in fact, Wikipedia says that a lot of companies shut down because of bad luck. But bad luck means poor planning. If you had not anticipated that situation, you cannot today say, well, it was bad luck, because you were in a position to foresee it, you did not. So it was poor planning. There's no such thing as bad luck in business. And if we believe that there can be bad luck in business, then we should not be in that business. These failures actually resulted from poor leadership. And no matter how you may explain it, they are all a question of leadership. Why ACFA was not able to realign its product and its processes to keep pace with the changing times, digital cameras, and Kodak was able to do that. Leadership. The leaders thought differently, and they planned differently, and they took some risks, and they pulled it off. There are two basic principles of successful business. Now, this is something everybody seems to agree on. There are a whole lot of things that people argue on. So I've taken just these two. There are so many others. And this is for you. If you want to run a successful business, my recommendation is please stick to these two basic principles. The first is serve your customers with a long-term perspective. Don't be satisfied with selling today, where kal dekha jayega. We'll see what happens tomorrow. This is not good for your business. The second thing is a more general perspective of the market, of the world. Contribute to ensuring healthy markets. What Enron did not contribute to a healthy market. What Satyam did not. What Lehman Brothers did not contribute to healthy markets. Now, if the market gets murky, if the market gets all messed up and dirty and infected, you are not going to be able to make money. It's your responsibility to make sure that the market is healthy. It is very healthy, and that's where ethics come in. We will talk briefly about ethics later on. But to my mind, really, these are the two basic principles of doing business. It's not only about me making money. By all means, make as much money as you can. But please make sure that the market remains healthy without making it murky, because then you will suffer and everybody else will also suffer. So the ground reality is this, and I'm sticking out my neck by saying this, and I'm waiting for the proverbial sword to cut it off. The old model of leadership is dead because of all of this. It is dead in the sense that if you want to go ahead from here, then you have to discount this and look at other patterns of leadership, other models of leadership. And I'm here to present only one of them before you. The old model of leadership that I'm talking about, where the managing director or the chief executive officer on the top is shouting orders to everybody and yelling at them and expecting compliance and immediate compliance. This kind of thing will not get you anywhere beyond here. This is where you are. If you're happy with that, fine. But beyond here, this is not going to work. You have to look out for different models of leadership. Now, let me clarify something for you. This does not mean that you don't need these capital L leaders. You cannot survive without them. They need to be there. They need to sit down and plan. They need to have the vision and percolate that vision down to everybody else. But you need to add to this. Please understand that I am not saying in the least, the whole company will fall apart if you don't have that. But you have to have them. But it is not only the executive team that shows leadership. Now, this is where I'm going into the main subject here. Look at what it says here. Every single employee. Now, when I say that, if you are entrepreneurs and you have your own companies, please think about some of the people who are working for you. You may even think about names and faces. Think about them. They are the ones I'm talking about. Every single, the sweeper, whose job is at the end of the day to sweep the shop floor and go home. The watchman. These are the people I am also talking about. And write up the skilled workers and the designers and the cutters and whoever else you have. Every single employee, whether at the front line, shop floor, in the IT, in HR, need to show leadership within their area of responsibility. I mentioned to you that you can no longer be satisfied with what your people are doing just because you have asked them to do this and this is the only thing they're doing. No longer. You cannot be satisfied. In your mind, you have to expect more from your people, and this should be put across to your people. That, all right, you are coming here as a cutter, you are coming here as the shop floor manager or supervisor, but I expect you to assume roles of leadership. And of course, an orientation of 1 hour is all that it takes to tell him what you expect him to do in terms of leadership. Please no longer be satisfied and content with what your people are doing because they are doing what you have told them. There's more that they have to do. Real leadership is not about dominance and control. Now, this poor fellow sitting in the workshop, in the shop floor and doing his thing, is not going to control other people and influence them. But he will lead. How? We'll come to that. Let's go back to the original definition of leadership. We said leadership is all about influence. So by that definition, if any person is able to influence somebody else, has to be a leader. So why only the capital L leader? No doubt he influences, and this capital L leader influences in a big way and makes great contribution in influencing people and aligning them with organizational culture, organizational demands and processes and all of that. Great. But can these other people working for you also assume roles to influence each other? Now, that's the question that I'm putting before you. That's the whole concept of leadership without title. I don't have a title. I'm not a leader. I'm just a worker. I operate this machine for 8 hours a day. But then I'm able to influence the people around me, positively helping the company develop. I think this should now be your minimum expectation, not just doing justice to their terms of reference and duties prescribed. It doesn't work anymore. If sustainability is going to be your catchword from now, if you want to make competition irrelevant, then you have to be doing these kind of things. So it's time to look at leaders in your workforce. Stop looking so much at the capital L leader. He's already there. He's there. But there are a whole lot of other leaders there which you are not recognizing. And they are the ones that have to come to the focus of your attention. So the bottom line is that companies will succeed today that do one thing. Grow the leadership capabilities of every single one of your employees. This is all it is about. And I said I'll make it simple, and this is as simple as it gets. The concept is simple. The process may not be so simple because it's a new concept. We have to find out what is the intended input, what kind of training you need to give them, what kind of exposure you need to give them, what kind of recognition they require, what kind of orientation is required. All of that is a work in progress. But so long as you realize that this is something that will get me further, then that's a start. And the other things will come along. Grow the leadership capabilities of every single person who is currently on your payroll. That's your challenge, if you really want to go further ahead from here. For companies to succeed, everyone now needs to show leadership within their specific role. It's the same thing said in a different way. Every single individual, you have to sit down and identify these individuals. Some of them are already there. They need to be recognized. I'll come to that later. But really, this is the challenge. Not to say that everyone will respond to this expectation. But the more of your employees respond to this expectation, the better off you are going to be. The better off you will be, the faster you will grow, and you will make the competition irrelevant, because you have a bunch of leaders who are engaged in the work. They have their heart and minds and souls in the work, and they take pride in what they are doing. And we'll come to all of this. The emotion, if you were able to influence another person, and the person acknowledges that you have done that to him, it gives you a great high. What does that do? Have you ever been in such a situation where you have able to show somebody a point or explain something to the person, and the person acknowledges it and says, yeah, I never thought of it that way. You're right. It gives you a great high. It'll give your people on the shop floor a great high. And what does that do? It results in engagement. It results in motivation. It results in better integration inside of your company, better productivity. People put their hearts in their work. They don't look at time. When I joined the school that I'm working in, this was my challenge. You know how it is with international schools. My challenge was to put away these wristwatches that we wear. It should be irrelevant. In a boarding school, a teacher cannot look at the time and work. I mean, I'm on duty throughout the week, 24/7. Principal of a residential school. I get calls at 1 in the morning saying that so-and-so is not well, we are rushing him off to the hospital. I have to respond to that call. But what about everybody else? This was my challenge. And together we pulled it off. Now, here is the thing, that you need to make sure that everybody is seen as a leader. Now, he may not be responding to that expectation, so we'll keep on working, but there are those who will respond, and that's where improvement takes place. Let's come to the small L leader. Now, this is what we are talking about. These small L leaders are the leaders without title. You know what it means. I don't have a title. You have not designated formally that person as a leader. That I am putting these 10 people under your care, so you are their leader. You're not done any such thing. These are all normal day-to-day workers or whatever structures of employment you have. But they are small L leaders. These are the characteristics of such people. And they exist everywhere. It's just that we don't notice them. They are quiet. They're invisible. We don't see them. Not in terms of invisibility as persons. Of course, it can't happen. But as leaders, they're invisible. Nobody notices them. And they're hardworking people. They're far from the limelight. In fact, they're so modest that they don't like to be in the limelight. They like to be aloof and not take credit for a lot of things. They are very practical, circumspect. They are hardly ever noticed. The important thing is that they make small incremental adjustments. And this is something that should be noticed and valued. I'm going to dwell on this point a little longer. What we are saying here is that you have to make a choice. And we'll come to it later again. The choice of whether you prefer for your company a leader who will make your company take giant strides forward, but it's not going to happen every day. Most of the time this happens when there is a crisis. When there's a problem facing us, this leader does something magical and puts together strategies, and the company takes a giant step forward. Do you want this? Or do you want small baby steps of movement happening, but happening every day and happening a lot? That's the choice you have to make, and that's the marvel of this paradigm of leadership. If you have more people who are assuming positions of leadership in your company, they are taking your company further ahead, but the steps are so small you will not notice them. But at the end of the day, you have moved a lot further than that one big giant step. This is all that is really at the heart of what we are saying here. And that's the choice that you have to make. And of course, they are innovative and creative. Have you seen one of these electricians when you have a problem? They're so innovative, they'll come up with some temporary arrangement till a more permanent solution is fixed. That person is a potential leader because they think differently. They are thinking differently and they're very creative people. In other words, what we are talking about is leadership without title. Now, this is where we come to the main subject. This was really a background of what we were saying. Now, we are talking about leaders without title. Now, this concept, this term, the terminology, the phrase used, leadership without title, was used by Robin Sharma. You know who he is. He wrote some wonderful books and he's dedicated his whole life to studying leadership. This is his latest work, leadership without title. But the concept has been around for a long time in different names and forms. For example, you just have to go on the internet and you'll see quiet leadership. It's been around for a long time. In fact, there's a book on quiet leadership, Leading Quietly. Invisible leadership. There is an outflow, radiation of leadership qualities, but the source is not known. The person is way in the background giving credit to other people and everybody is better off for it. Invisible leadership. Then there's a similar thing called hidden leadership, and then servant leadership, where the leader assumes a role of serving others. I'm your servant. I'm going to make life simpler for you. And I'm going to give you solutions that will benefit the company, but you will also be better off for it. And really the same thing. And transformational leadership. So these are different terminologies used for the same thing. So what Mr. Robin Sharma has done, repackaged all of these, added a lot of his own insights, and come up with a new catchword of leadership without title. It's based on this premise that to succeed, companies cannot afford any longer, and we have mentioned this 2 times. In 2 of my previous slides, I mentioned it, I'm mentioning it again, so that it really strikes home. Companies cannot afford any longer to neglect all that their employees have to offer beyond what they are already offering. If you want to remain where you are today, this is fine. There's no issues. Give them a terms of reference and assess their productivity based on what they are doing. But if you want to move ahead from here, it's not good enough anymore. You have to expect more from them, and your workforce has to give it to you. If not, the next lot of people you will employ will give it to you. Because this is a paradigm that is catching on. Now, people have extraordinary capabilities. Many of the people working for you are potentially great leaders, but they are not leading. Why? Why is it that you don't have these kind of title-less leaders in your organization or in any organization? It's just because nobody told them. Nobody told them that you can actually lead without having a title and position, which is why I mentioned that 1 hour of orientation. I'm appointing you today, you are a cutter, you're a designer, you're an electrician, you are a sweeper, you're whatever, but I also expect you to be a leader. And what do I mean by that? 40 minutes, 45 minutes of an orientation, that's it. Gets the message what he has to do. Some of your people will try to go overboard with it, but that's fine, as long as they are trying to find. Again, I say it's a work in progress, but the message has to be put across to them. Tell them that we will appreciate people, and if you can reward them so much better. It's all about creating a new culture. It's all about redefining your organizational culture, where you're expecting them to give you something more than their immediate job requirements. So you open up this potentiality and see how your people respond to it, and you'll be surprised. You'll be actually very surprised to see how, because it is in human nature. To lead comes naturally to human beings. That's why we are social beings. That's why we live in society. But when you block artificially, you are not to lead, just listen to the capital L leader. We are artificially preventing this outflow of leadership in our people, which anyway exists. Now, leadership is not about titles. It's not a business card, I'm the leader, CEO, MD, or whatever. It is a way of being, or it's a way of thinking, it's a way of working. And again, it's human nature. We all have the ability to lead. All you need is a crisis in which to realize that you are all leaders. All the people working for us are leaders. They will all come up with different solutions. Maybe not the best, but they have it in them to lead. I mean, if somebody offers you a solution, isn't that an aspect of leadership? If somebody is able to resolve a conflict happening next to him, isn't that an indication of potential leadership? What else do you think? Now, these things are easy to see because we have stopped looking at the capital L leader and the characteristics of that. Once you take away your sight from that momentarily, you'll begin to see a lot of leadership traits in the people that are working for you. Now build on that because you'll be better off for it. Every single employee within an organization can and may often do show leadership. And what do they achieve? What do they do? And this, I assure you, is already happening. This is happening silently, quietly, because it's in their nature. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of being. They're doing it anyway. Only it goes unrecognized. They are driving positive change. Somebody's grumbling, oh, they don't compensate us enough and there's so much work to do and lengthy hours. And one person says something that pacifies this fellow, that he's okay now. Yeah, you're right. Okay, things will improve from here on. That person is a leader, and that person can do wonders for your company. Influence. Of course, leadership is all about influence. So if there is somebody on the shop floor who's influencing somebody else, he's your leader. They're doing a great job for you, quietly, silently, without you asking him. He shows innovation because leadership is again is all about innovation, out of the box thinking and so on. And stand for excellence. This is the person who is able to promote excellence among the people around him without being asked, without being assigned a responsibility. These are the people we are talking about, and you should be looking out for them. Now imagine, it's a human ability. Human beings can imagine. So let's imagine your company. How would it be if an increasing number of your people assume these kind of roles? Who can actually influence other people positively, resolve conflicts, bring about excellence in the work, in people around them, silently, quietly, incremental steps, one at a time. Think about that. Imagine what would happen in an organization if every single person, now this is a hypothetical situation, every single person will not be able to do that, but an increasing number of people show leadership within his or her area of responsibility. Where would your company be today? Imagine. So the lead without a title message really is all about personal responsibility. It's about ownership. It's mine. This is my job. I have to do it to the best of my ability. And I have to make a difference. This is all it is. Assume more responsibility. Now, who is this leader without a title? What are we looking at? Or let's say, what do we expect? If you find one, chances are these are what you will find. Obviously, they do not make high-stakes decisions. That's for the capital L leader. This poor fellow down there, how is he in a position to make earth-shattering decisions and so on? It's not going to happen and should not happen. They are often not at the top of the organization. In fact, you'll find they'll be somewhere down the hierarchy and in the pyramid, way down. They don't have the spotlight on them. That's why they're invisible. And they're very modest. These people are modest. They don't like to take credit. In fact, I think this is a good parameter to search for these people. Look for modesty. If you find a person who's very modest in your company, chances are this person is a potential leader. This person will have a lot of leadership attributes because does not want a lot of things. They don't often even think of themselves as leaders. They don't. And that's a good place to start with. They act quietly and effectively, making things. This is important. This is something you need to think about. What does this silent leader do? What does this leader without a title do? They make things better than they were before. That's what they do. That's how they contribute to your company. They act quietly and effectively, making things somewhat better, sometimes much better than they would otherwise be. Very quietly, without taking credit for it. Internally, they are helping, they are contributing, going beyond the demands of their immediate tasks. Now, where are they? Where are these small L leaders? They are everywhere. They're here. They are in your companies. They are in the shop floor. They are at all levels of your human resource pyramid. They're there. Because, again, we said leadership is not a title. It is a way of thinking. It's a way of being. So they are there. Such people exist. But you will notice them by looking away from the great figure. So what we said is stop defining and looking at leadership in the context of capital L leadership. Forget about that concept for a while, and then you will start. It's like not being able to notice small lamps because of the sun. Now remove the sun and you will see a whole lot of small lamps shining all around you. That's all that we are saying, and they are there. They are quietly illuminating the realm of leadership in your companies, and you are not even aware of it because we are so much taken in by the brilliance of that capital L leader, that one leader. If we look at leadership with a wide angle lens, broaden your perspective, cover your whole company, sit down, think about the people, name by name, face by face. Actually, it's a very, very systematic thing to do, and I know people who've done that. They've drawn down a whole list of their employees, assigned to managers, and asked them. Many companies do that anyway, employee profiles, and they have got their assessments and periodic assessments and all of that. They have them. Their records are there. But they sit down and search for indications of leadership. It's a very systematic thing if you choose to do it. Assume a wide-angle lens, and you will see men and women who are far from heroes and yet are successfully solving important problems and contributing to a better world. Remove world and write down company, to a better company for you, a better organization for you. I put the word world here because this whole concept of leadership without title involves every field of human endeavor. And we always say behind every successful man there are a whole lot of ladies here, they should know. There's a woman. That's leadership, and it's true. I mean, we men better agree that it's true because we are outnumbered at this moment by ladies here. But it's true. That's leadership. So I would prefer to use a broader context in this principle of leadership without title. Again, attributes of the quiet leaders. High ownership for the work and the organization. They are engaged. These are the engaged people. Now, either they are already doing this, or you can magically, through the force of your own endeavors and processes, bring about this to happen. This is what you will achieve. You will have motivated and engaged employees. But isn't that what you want anyway? Do you know how expensive it is to replace a person who leaves your employment? It is 1.6 times the salary that you are paying that person. This is a HR calculation. They come up with some figures that way. It's very expensive to lose people. So you have to engage them. Now, by creating a situation of leadership for your people, you are contributing to that. High sense of responsibility. These people are well organized. And they have a very good rapport with others. They have good relationship with other people. And again, this is something else to look at. Not from the perspective of popularity. These are people who want to become popular with others. They are not the ones that will do wonders. What they've been doing, they're confident, but never overconfident. More characteristics. Imagine your company being filled with such people. Focus on action instead of words. They really don't care about what you're saying. They don't, like me, I'm standing here and saying a whole lot of things. They don't care about these kind of things. They believe in action. This is another thing to look at in your kind of assessments and employee reviews. This is something to look at. People who really act. They are proactive, not reactive. I mean, a situation comes, he's told, he goes and does something. They're proactive. They look at the situation and take whatever measures required to be done. They're understanding, helpful, open-minded. They have likable and relatable personality, approachable, easy to talk to. They are very friendly and very down to earth. So these are the kind of people we are talking about. More. They listen more. These are not people who will keep blabbering about and I did this and I did that. Remember, they're very modest people and they prefer to listen to you. Anybody around them, they will not be speaking much. That's another trait to look for in your people. If you have such people, chances are these are your potential leaders. And by listening to others, in fact, this is a leadership golden rule. Listen. This is something I keep telling my teachers. Somehow we feel that as a teacher, I have the God-given authority to teach all the time. Now, I've made it a rule that the first thing that happens in the class, 5 minutes, the teacher does not say a word. There are the students who will talk to the teacher, how was yesterday, what did you do, and they will ask questions and so on and so forth. So the students run the conversation during that first 5 minutes of period. And it does wonders. These children are so happy, they have been heard. Remember, human beings have a desire to be heard. They have a need to be heard. How many of our employees are actually being heard? Now this poor man, modest, a titled as leader, does that for you. He's a good listener, he's hearing out a lot of people around him, nodding his head wisely, and puts at rest a lot of other people's hearts and concerns. That's a leader. He's contributing to something that maybe the capital L leader should have been doing. But really he cannot do it because of the quantum of the work that he has to do. But that fellow, without your being asked, he's doing it. That's a leader without a title. They don't have egos. And I mentioned to you this question of egos. Now, in India, we are very positive about our image, how we are perceived by others. The West have realized the futility of this, so they have let it go. There's a lot of backslapping and a lot of ribbing, all of that happening across the employment pyramid. And they're better off for it. So they're better relationship, not very formal and the kind of respect that is expected and all of that. The more these hierarchies are flexible and done away with, the better off we are. So these egos are under check. And what do we mean by that? It means relating success and failure to my self-worth. Oh, I failed, so now that means that my self-worth has gone down. What will Baki log kya sochenge? There's this catchword we keep talking about. What will others think of me? Now, where is this question of me? All right, I made a mistake, so let's fix it. This ego has to go out of the window. And these people don't have it anyway. And it's a wonderful thing not to have. They keep calm and cool under pressure. They have no trouble admitting mistakes. Now, this is something, again, all of us should have. I mean, a leader should come and say, in the board of directors, across the shareholders, everybody come and say, friends, this was my decision, and now in hindsight, I realize that it was a wrong decision. And I apologize for it with the assurance that we will take whatever remedial measures required. How many people have the courage to be able to do that? These people have. They come and say, "Arey, galti ho gayi. Next time we'll do it better. Next time." Puts a lot of people's heart at rest. And what is important is the last point. It is their character that sets them apart, not their tactics or style or whatever. It's natural to them. It's who they are that makes them stand apart. So these are the people who potentially can work marvels for you. This is it. How can you be benefited by such people? If you find them. I'm not saying if you have them, because you already have them. I promise you, you all have them. If you manage to find them, this is what it'll do for you. Looking beyond the charismatic, inspirational, and aggressive few expands options for availing more leadership. I mentioned it to you. Why don't we have enough Ratan Tatas in order to have more Tata companies? You cannot. Such people are 1 in a million, and they are made out of years of experience and whatever it takes. But then, if you lower your vision of who you define as a leader, you are creating a larger pool of potential leaders. And that's the trick. And you already have them. Recognize them as leaders, gradually groom them, and you will have an increasing supply of leadership, organizational leadership, right from the shop floor to the top boardroom. And that's the trick. That's what this approach will do for you. It cultivates an engaged workforce with healthy sense of belonging. Because when the work is done, they say, we did it. It's the quality of the silent leader. He does not take credit for what is happening. Always gives credit to the others. So they are happy. Oh, we did it. We managed to do this, and they feel proud. And they are engaged in the work processes, and you'll be better off for it. A very good thing is that leaders build other leaders. These small L leaders, they are building. Why? Because coaching comes naturally to them. Arey, aisa nahi karte. Don't cut it like this. Cut it like this. Without being asked. He is creating new leaders. And there are other people who will try to follow this man. They will lead, or lady. They create. Now, coaching is one of the elements of leadership that is missing in our system of leadership today. Coaching, you're aware of it. There are professional coaches who are paid a lot of money to come inside companies and coach people, to help them align themselves with institutional processes and whatever it takes. But you don't have to. They're there. There's a small L leader who is a potential coach, and he can take care of other people without really you're structuring it and formalizing it. Small incremental acts of leadership more powerful than one big bold leadership move. I mentioned it to you. You have to make this decision. You want a leader who will make these giant strides forward for your company, or you want these bunch of leaders who are taking small incremental steps and taking your company beyond what that one giant step could take you to. But that's a possibility. These are all the benefits that you can avail of through this approach. The power and impact of the small L leader may not be always seen, but it is always felt by the system. You take this as a golden rule. You will not see this happen. It is not visible. In fact, I have 3 examples at the end of my presentation about such leadership. And I don't have examples of actual shop floor small L leaders because they're not there. They're not visible for me to even relate to. Probably you can relate to in hindsight that, yeah, so-and-so people possibly is one. I need to look at that more seriously. And some organizations may not realize that they have potentially great leaders. You have them. Groom them. Leadership. Today, for survival, there are 2 things that no company can afford not to have. One is creativity and innovation. There are some companies today that if you apply, General Electric is one of them. Intel is another one. There are these big companies. I want to work for you and I want to apply for a job. These companies will not take your CV and application. They will direct you to an online test. There is an online test that you have to give, 25 or so questions. This test is all about test of creativity. They have their own parameters and their own tests, and they will test you for that. And then they will, when this comes to them with their report, with your CVs and everything, then they take a decision. Why? Why is creativity and innovation such an important thing today? Because of this competitive nature of the market today, there are more questions than there are answers. You know, you should be looking for people who are willing to offer you answers for these questions, if you are to make competition irrelevant. The second thing is leadership. You cannot rely to those 1, 2, 3 major big leaders that you have anymore. You need more of them. These are 2 things that can be regarded as recipes for success: creativity and innovation, and leadership. So you have them, recognize them. Now, what can you do? Here is what you do from here. This is my recommendation to you. Look for these small L leaders. They're there. Look for them. How systematic can you look so that nobody goes out of your gaze? That's up to you. There are systems by which you can do that. Through your appraisals, through buzzword. Actually, if you just spend some time talking with the lowest rung of your employees, you will come to know. They will be discussing a particular name often. That's the guy. That's the silent leader because of what he's doing, because they are influenced by that person. Look for them, recognize them, acknowledge them, and value them. And I'll go further and say reward them. Empower the small L leader employees. Leadership does not happen by force, but by giving responsibility and releasing control. That 45 minutes of orientation is enough. For a new employee, you tell them, or today, you go back and say, all right, we are starting a new project in our company. I want you all to become leaders. A 45-minute orientation for them and see how it works. And then keep an eye and look and recognize and acknowledge them and so on. The heart of leadership is developing others, is coaching. And change the way leaders are seen in the organization. So you should let it be known by your valuing them, by your recognizing and acknowledging them, that you have redefined the whole concept of leadership in your company. So more people will feel encouraged to step forward with leadership roles. Initially, they will be reluctant. And please understand that changing organizational culture is one of the most difficult things ever. It takes a lot of time. But once accomplished, life becomes easy for everyone. For example, the organizational culture of coming on time. This is something in India that we've always been struggling with. But by some magic and miracle, if you're able to create a culture then you don't need checks and balances. You don't need these swipe cards, and you don't need electronic log entries of who came and went. It's a culture. It's unheard of in our company for anybody to come late. Becomes very easy. But then creating that culture is very difficult. Now, you need to create a culture in your organization where leadership paradigms are redefined, and people are willing to offer that kind of leadership. There are 3 examples that I could pull out. Now, these are, I cannot claim and say these are leaders without titles, because actually in the larger context of the term, they were all great leaders. But here are some examples of what I mean by leadership without title. Mahatma Gandhi, on the eve of Indian independence. Now, who got us independence? We can go on and argue forever on this. But Mahatma Gandhi had a great role in getting us that independence. Instead of taking credit for himself, instead of basking in the glory of achieving his life's objective and purpose, what was he doing on that eve of independence? He was in Bengal nursing. There were riots happening because of the partition of East Pakistan and all of that. We'll have a break now before we continue. Thank you. Thank you. So this is an example of quiet leadership. There's another great example of Dr. Satish Dhawan. He was heading the space research program of India and all of that. Now, you're aware of a whole range of rockets that India invented and produced. One of them was a SLV, the satellite launching vehicle, 3D. It was launched in August of 79 at the cost of 20 crores, and it was a failure. It blew up in mid-flight. Now, somebody had to go and address the press. Now, Dr. Abul Kalam, a former president, he was in charge of this project. He was the head of the SLV program. He prepared himself with his notes, and as he was walking to go and address, Satish Dhawan stopped him. He said, no, I'm the head of this whole department and this whole program. I will have to go. And he went and took the responsibility for it, promising the next year we'll come up with a success. Next year, SLV-3D2 was launched, and it was successful. It was in July of 80. And Dr. Satish Dhawan asked who to go and address the press? Dr. Abul Kalam. Now, what does that tell us? He said, now you go and address them and tell them more technical things about how this project happened and how we succeeded. Brilliant. I mean, look at this. This is an example. Not now. Dr. Satish Dhawan was a leader with a title. But here's an example of what it looks like, a leadership without title. And of course, Sachin Tendulkar is an example. Sachin Tendulkar's presence in the Indian team is not for his run-making abilities anymore. It is for his grooming and helping the younger cricketers. It was a role defined for him by the previous coach. What was his name? Who just left from South Africa. This role was given to him. We want you in the cricket team just to help them, give them tips on how to deal with pressure, how to deal with this kind of bowler, whatever you have learned, just tell them. Quiet leadership, leadership without a title. I have a few quotes that I'm not going to read for you, but these are quotes that, and they are very, Lao Tzu has spoken about this whole concept hundreds of years ago. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. Now that's the mark of a fantastic leader, the best leader if you like. I will leave this here. And can we have a break? Yes? Maybe a 10 minutes? We'll have a 10-minute break and come to the next part, which is very brief about talent management. So if we can please come back at 11, we'll have a short break.